In fact, forget about Earth. So far, the human brain is by far the most complex object we've ever observed in the universe. But when you lie in bed at night trying to fall asleep, it would be wonderful if it also knew how to shut up for a bit, right? It's probably happened to you too. You rest your head on the pillow, ready for a good night's sleep. But your brain starts thinking about everything that happened that day, the other day, and everything that might possibly happen in the future, and it just won't let you fall asleep. Do you know why this happens? And what should you do in that situation? Let's find out. Unstoppable thoughts are one of the most common obstacles to falling asleep. In psychology, we call this rumination, or more politely, mental distress. You can guess why it's called rumination. Just like how cows or other ruminant animals bring back up the food they've already swallowed and re-chew it, our mind also brings back up the things that have already happened and tries to relive them. In other words, it ruminates. Even though this can give us a chance to fully digest events that we haven't completely processed during the day, it can also cause us to fixate on mistakes we've made, or think we might have made, to overanalyze situations, and to worry excessively about what might happen tomorrow. As a result, stress hormones like cortisol get released in our bodies right before bedtime. This surge of cortisol before sleep negatively impacts the secretion of melatonin, which controls our day-night cycle, our circadian rhythm. This not only lengthens the time it takes to fall asleep, but also reduces the quality of the sleep you finally do get. And this last part is really bad, because high and chronic stress is associated with countless health problems, even an increased risk of early death, in addition to being linked with not being able to get deep sleep. And deep sleep is when your body and mind rest the most. If you don't get that deep sleep, even if you technically spend 9 to 10 hours in bed, you might wake up feeling almost as if you hadn't slept at all. Naturally, your alertness and resilience drop, and you actually increase the odds of those things happening that were worrying you the night before. In other words, bedtime rumination becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's actually not hard to see why such a behavior evolved. Our ancestors encountered countless dangers and novel situations during the day, whether among their tribe or out in the wild. And that's not just for human ancestors. It also applies to older primate ancestors and mammals in general. Learning from these experiences and making better plans for the future was extremely critical for their survival and reproductive success. And it's precisely for this reason that our brains evolved a special neural network known as the default mode network, which includes the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex, and parts of the parietal cortex. This network is crucial for daydreaming, listening to our inner voice, self-reflection, and recalling past experiences, basically when our minds aren't actively occupied with a specific task. Our ancestors are thought to have gained important insights by idling in this network. But nowadays, we no longer seem to have any moment to let our brains rest, to sit in silence and just listen to ourselves and our thoughts. We're constantly busy with something, always spending our attention on something else. Think about what you do all day. You rush to finish your tasks. Your parents, spouse, or friends are constantly telling you something. You eat meals and chat with your friends. You scroll through videos on your phone and get lost for hours. Because of this, your brain can't enter that controlled, reflective thought process during the day. But the moment you put your head on the pillow and close your eyes, you finally free your brain. That's when the default mode network can finally get to work. And as a result, your brain starts hurriedly processing all the things you've experienced recently, and simply won't let you fall asleep. This problem is more common among people who have mental health conditions affecting those parts of the brain that are part of the default mode network. But you don't necessarily need to have a mental health issue to experience it. In fact, studies show that this experience may not even be directly related to your daily stress levels. Sure, many people who are stressed during the day do experience these intrusive thoughts at bedtime. But you could have a perfectly calm day and still face this issue when you try to go to sleep. And you can experience these disturbing thought streams in several different ways. Some people experience a flood of thoughts in their minds, looping back to the start over and over again. Others feel like they're watching different ideas and scenarios, as if from the outside. Some have ideas racing rapidly, one after another, as if multiple voices are talking quickly inside their head. And sometimes, people experience physiological symptoms like a racing heart, sweating, or labored breathing alongside these thoughts. Of course, this troubling state has many possible causes. As you might expect, common stress factors, such as losing a job, financial difficulties, moving to a new home, having a baby, or grades at school, are a big factor. But when combined with certain other symptoms, it can also be a sign of mental health conditions like panic disorder, anxiety, bipolar disorder, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder. So if you're experiencing this at a level that negatively affects your life, I strongly recommend seeking professional help. This state can also be triggered by consuming certain substances, like illegal stimulants such as cocaine or meth, or even legal stimulants like caffeine, too close to bedtime. So what can you do? What's the secret to finally getting a good night's sleep, free from those disturbing thoughts? There are some standard things you can try. For instance, about 5-10 minutes before going to bed, sit down and briefly write in a small notebook about the things you're worried about that day, and give yourself a little time to think them through. Or you can try mindfulness and meditation techniques that help clear the mind, essentially doing in a controlled way what your brain might do chaotically when you're trying to sleep. Sure, those thoughts will come to you during that writing or meditation session as well. But that's precisely the goal of these sessions, to gain some control over those thoughts. That way, you won't be lying there trying to sleep while also getting more and more restless because you can't stop these mental loops. Another crucial piece of advice: I know it's tough to do, but try not to bring your phone or tablet to bed. Their overall effects on mental health are awful to begin with. But especially if you're about to sleep and you see something infuriating on social media, that's basically a direct recipe for raising your stress levels. This also applies to some extent to watching horror or thriller movies or even reading such books before bedtime. But their effect on stress levels is generally weaker than that of social media, especially if you already like that kind of film or book, meaning you're not forced into or surprised by it. So if you really need to do something, picking a movie or a book instead of scrolling social media is the wiser choice. Of course, nutrition is also really important. During the day, make sure you consume foods rich in tryptophan like bananas, nuts, peanuts, or turkey. Tryptophan boosts the production of serotonin, often called the happiness hormone. Serotonin also plays a role in producing melatonin, the sleep hormone. Likewise, avoid drinking coffee within 6-7 hours before bedtime and try not to eat or consume alcohol within 2-3 hours of sleeping. This can make it easier to drift off. But there's another, more specific method I can suggest called cognitive shuffle. In this method, we aim to hack the brain's tendency to jump from thought to thought and keep us awake. We want to direct our brain so that instead of linking to negative or stressful thoughts from the day, it goes off on the random pathways we choose. It's pretty simple. Pick any object or word. Let's say piano. If you're not a fantasic, you can imagine that piano in your mind for about 5-6 seconds. Maybe you're touching it, perhaps playing a simple melody. Then break down the word piano into its letters. P-I-A-N-O. Now, for each letter, think of as many words as you can that start with that letter. Let's try P. Potato, Pluto, pigeon, and so on. But spend 5 to 6 seconds imagining each word. That way, you're giving your brain the mental processing time it's itching to use anyway. Once you run out of words for P, move on to I, do the same, then A, N, O, and so on. You'll find that, in most cases, you'll be asleep before you've even finished all the letters. Remember that on average, a person falls asleep in about 14 minutes. The main idea is to fill those 14 minutes with thoughts that won't upset or worry you. Because the random words you generate for each letter are all unrelated, your brain won't have enough time to form connections to your daily worries. Therefore, you won't end up stuck in those troubling thoughts. That's why this method works so well. That's about it. Keep in mind, it's quite normal to do some self-reflection before bed, spending a little alone time with your thoughts and evaluating your day. Almost nobody in this world falls asleep the moment their head hits the pillow. Almost nobody is entirely free of worries, so it's perfectly normal to struggle with sleep from time to time. What's important is learning to have realistic expectations about this process. Sadly, life's worries don't just vanish into thin air. Life isn't easy, and wishing for everything to get better often doesn't magically fix it. But our brains evolved under conditions requiring us to cope with far more dangerous threats. It's these very mechanisms that keep our brains healthy and strong. Understanding them, with all their flaws, and positioning yourself accordingly is one of the most effective ways to maintain your mental well-being in tough times. And when you realize you can't do it alone, please don't hesitate to seek professional help. If your heart or liver hurt, you wouldn't just try to fix it by yourself. So why treat your brain any differently? See you in the next video. Sleep well.